school teacher in Dallas, metro area. What?
I'm Charlie Hunt. I am a returned Peace Corps volunteer, served in Vanuatu from 2006 to 2008 with my wife. I work with the Downtown Denver Partnership in the Environment section, and I'm also the International Service Chair for the Lodo Rotary Club.
My name is Scott Lewandowski, and I'm a master's candidate at CU Denver for political science, public policy.
And would you guys just like to go around the room and introduce yourself too?
I'm Jonathan. And
I'm Courtney.
Okay.
I'm Alexis.
I'm Aaron. I'm Nick. I'm Corbin. I'm Jace. Jacob. Zach.
Kristen.
Andrew.
Devin. Jacob.
Is this the cheering, the rooting section?
Yeah, the rooting and the camera. I need to turn it down the camera.
I think we still got a couple more minutes. We'll build now. Okay. Get started.
So it was Jonathan, Courtney, who's
Alexis.
Alexis?
My name's Joseph. You can call me Joseph Solid.
Aaron.
Aaron, okay. Got it.
I don't ask when you start.
Nick, okay.
Corbin.
Okay.
Jace. J-A-C-E.
Just, I'm filming.
Jacob.
I already started filming something.
Zach.
Kristen.
Andrew.
And Devin.
While we're waiting, how long did you guys have to work on this? How many months? Or
About a month.
About a month.
Really started getting into it the last 2 weeks with practice and research and study to got our topic and the past 2 weeks.
Crunch time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We changed our topic 4 times.
Was it because it was hard to kind of figure out what you could all kind of get behind? Or?
Well, then, we were going, I'm sure you've heard about the Coney thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we were going to go with that, but then that kind of just
Faded off.
No, I got out of hand. It didn't fade off clear. It's like, it was bad.
Yeah, and it was it was just too popular to
There's two sides to it.
Yeah, it really is.
Guys, other classes have started.
I think that last announcement was the announcement to start.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
All right. Go.
Why have you been enrolled since your country became? There's just so much tension.
The International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War is well renowned throughout the entire world for their Nobel Peace Prize in 1985 for their work against nuclear weapons in the world. The IPPNW calls this meeting together in order to allow countries to state their stances on nuclear weapons. We'll start with Pakistan.
Alright, well as a country, Pakistan right now feels that nuclear weapons are a necessary precaution. Not necessarily to use the nuclear weapons at a time like right now, but as a defensive strategy against a country like India, who right now is an estimated 60 to 80 nuclear weapons, and is continuously increasing their nuclear arsenal. And seeing as there was a territorial dispute over the area of Kashmir, which is an area between Pakistan and India, Pakistan right now feels that as India continues to escalate and focus and invigorate this issue even more, we feel that nuclear weapons are mandatory, not only necessary for our country, but mandatory for the protection of our people in the long run. And we feel that nuclear weapons kind of put Pakistan on the map in terms of global security and a global presence, because there are only 9 countries in the world with nuclear weapons, and we feel that this will get our name out into the world and get our foot in the door in terms of international presence.
A serious global concern is the influence of terrorists on Pakistan and radical groups that are unfriendly to other parts of the world, particularly the West. And we feel that if Pakistan were to contain a large number of nuclear weapons, it would pose a serious threat to global security.
Okay, well, when you're talking about terrorism, Pakistan actually in the past, we will concede that Pakistan has allowed and acknowledged terrorism in our country, and at community-based levels, at ground zero, we've actually worked with terrorism groups to work with our people, to protect our people, and in turn, we allow those groups to survive in our country. But what other countries may see as terrorism, for us, is not necessarily terrorism. What they may see as a danger is a safety for us, because the protection of our people is so important, and we're such an economically unstable country right now that we feel that terrorism is a necessary threat. Now, when we're talking about nuclear weapons possession, we draw the line between protection of our local people and possession of nuclear weapons, and that we allow terrorism to thrive at ground zero with the people. We're not allowing terrorists to come into possession of nuclear weapons or nuclear materials, because that would not only endanger our country, but the rest of the world as well.
I am fearful, this is just a personal standpoint, I don't know if anybody else feels this way, I'm fearful because of the amount of terrorism and terrorists that are in your country, that you would be the antagonist if you were granted these weapons that you request.
Well, first of all, nobody's granting us nuclear weapons. It's a choice our country has made on its own. And once again, you may see us as a threat, but for us, nuclear weapons are a safety precaution against India. So you can say whatever you want about terrorism. You can say that we're a global threat, but from our perspective, from our standpoint, nuclear weapons are a necessary defensive strategy. And if we were to get rid of nuclear weapons alone, our country would lose a substantial amount of leverage against a country like India, who right now, territorial dispute is at, it's come to a head. It's come to a key point right now.
Does the amount of power you get from having nuclear weapons really make up for the cost of the weapons?
Well, currently, Pakistan is spending $2.5 billion a year towards nuclear weapon development. And while this is a substantial cost out of our national federal budget, Pakistan does feel that the safety of the people outweighs any economic cost that may come from allocating money towards this nuclear weapon program. And combined with somewhat working together with groups such as the Haqqani Network to protect our people, as well as nuclear weapons in our country, it has allowed us to make our name well known in the world using nuclear weapons.
Next country, please.
As Pakistan was stating, India and Pakistan have great tension between them. There's so much that it's scaring both of us that who's going to use these weapons, what are we going to do, and who has more. But clearly Pakistan does have more nuclear weapons than we do, and it's just we keep our nuclear weapons as a defense action against Pakistan because we're not sure what they'll do with them. As far as us both having them access, it's scary for the both of us, and it frightens us all. But we have stated that we will not use our nuclear weapons against Pakistan first, but we will be glad to use them second. But as far as we see it, if Pakistan doesn't have them, then India doesn't really need them either.
I totally agree with that statement because, expanding on my point that I brought up earlier, sort of against you, the amount of terrorism and terrorists in your country. I mean, terrorism is not something that you sit back, for 9/11 for instance, totally took us off guard, did that act of terror. They do not sit back, wait for something to come, and then respond. They go get it first. And that's what I am personally fearful of, and I know the opinions throughout this room may differ from mine. But personally, I believe that the terrorists could abuse this power of having a nuclear weapon.
Next country, please.
We're the representatives from Iran, and at this time we do not have any nuclear weapons, but we are enriching our uranium programs and building factories and things underground to help create nuclear weapons. And we are enriching our uranium programs, and we have enough uranium in our country to have easily more nuclear weapons than some of the countries here.
Like India and Pakistan, we have great tension between us and Israel. And if we found out that Israel is going to make an attack on us, we will have no self-defense. And that's basically the reason why we need nuclear weapons.
In Israel, we believe that countries should be able to have nuclear weapons, but that it should be selective countries and that it should be they should be monitored to make sure that their nuclear production does not get out of hand, such as what happened in Russia. 10,000 nuclear weapons is quite a bit, and it seems like an unnecessarily large amount. And we believe that Iran should not be able to produce nuclear weapons, because a nuclear Iran is a threat to the whole world. They would be the aggressor, not the defense. They would not use these nuclear weapons in defense, they would use them in aggression. And I fear that their discretion of which countries they attack would cause a mutually assured destructive war, which is dangerous to the whole world. And in Israel, we find this threat personal. It is a threat to they have threatened to wipe us from the face of the earth, so it's a threat to our very existence.
Representative, why do you think that you get to decide who has nuclear weapons and who doesn't?
I never said I got to decide. This meeting is to decide who gets to make these decisions.
You stated that we shouldn't have nuclear weapons.
Yes, I think many of the other countries would agree with that. You're a threat to the whole world.
Your government is filled with a lot of radical movements that are unfriendly to the world, similar to that in Pakistan. However, yours is seen with an even bigger influence on your government.
Just
and
like
that is a global fear.
Just like Pakistan, we need a way to protect ourselves in case other people attack us, because most of the countries here are against us, and if we get attacked, then we will have no way of self-defense if they bomb us.
We understand your need for defense, but our concern is whether or not you're drawing the line between terrorism and country defense.
Next country, please.
As a representative of North Korea believes that the possession of nuclear weapons should be the decision of every country's own. That who wouldn't want nuclear weapons? They would make each and every country more powerful. And we think that it would be every country's best interest to decide on their own. If they don't want nuclear weapons, that's too bad for them, that they don't want to have that greater power and be more superior.
But if your enemy, representative, has these nuclear weapons, you are threatened by this, and you basically have no choice if you want to defend yourself. And that is really how this was all kicked off, is by that. It was an arms race. It still sort of is an arms race as to who can get more, who can be bigger, who can be better.
Well, North Korea is a still developing country, and we are putting a lot of time and effort into researching and developing nuclear weapons. And I don't see why all of you are working so hard to get rid of them when they make you so much better than everyone else. And also, we are such a torn nation, and we do not want to be poked and prodded by other nuclear powers, such as many nations in this room.
Next country, please.
We're the representatives of the United States, and we want a nuclear-free world. Even though we create the nuclear weapons, we don't have the most, and then to keep moving them north in order to keep our own citizens safe. And because of it, because of the nuclear weapons, we've lost many men's lives.
The U.S. alone has 5,800 nuclear weapons, and it's created over 111 different types. And as a standpoint for the U.S., we believe we should decrease this amount, both in the U.S. and Russia, as well as all the other countries. We also believe that we may replace some of those older ones with newer, more stable ones, more stable nuclear weapons.
Excuse me. I represent China, and we currently boast a new emergence as a global superpower. However, we do believe that nuclear proliferation is very harmful to the world and poses a serious global threat. And we believe the first step to eliminating nuclear weapons from the world as a whole is for China, the United States and Russia to start demolishing their stockpiles because they contain 95% of the world's nuclear weapons. And really, they have to set an example for the globe. For small countries like North Korea, they really want the power that comes with nuclear weapons. And that's because they see these super countries who have the weapons, and they have a lot of global standing, and they can, in a way, push another country around.
I represent Russia, and as the entire world knows, we have been an aggressor with nuclear weapons for the past 60, 70 years. As you can see, Russia is no longer the Soviet Union, and we have turned over a new leaf. It is a new era of government, and therefore, even though we do have the top arsenal in the world, we believe that we should set an example in anti-proliferation. We believe that if Russia, us, and the U.S. Extinguish their nuclear arsenal, we believe that the rest of the world will follow. I mean, number 1 and 2, Russia at 10,000 plus nuclear weapons, and the U.S. at 8,500. And then, when you think about who third is, Russia with 300, that is a vast difference. France. Anyway, we believe that we could set an example for the rest of the world to follow in extinguishing nuclear weapons.
Representative, if countries were to hypothetically extinguish nuclear weapons, how do you propose that you could guarantee that every single country eradicates their nuclear weapon?
Possibly by investigating nuclear facilities. That'd be a way.
Well, I mean, if you all want to come together and make peace and just get rid of these, a treaty would be necessary.
What did you suggest, Ambassador?
I would suggest an international police force that would inspect the nuclear facilities to make sure no nuclear weapons are being developed and that all nuclear weapons have been destroyed.
One thing we could add is that countries who do not follow the rules set forth from this meeting and carry on with creating and mobilizing nuclear weapons would have to be punished in some way. And does anyone know how we would do this?
We, the IPPNW, will propose a treaty to find a less catastrophic and more economical way to solve the world's problems. So this would be to disarm the nuclear weapons and then investigate nuclear facilities to make sure that these weapons are disarmed. And if a country was not to follow this treaty, they would be boycotted and banned from trade from the other countries in the treaty. The treaty would also utilize collective security, so a nuclear-free country wouldn't have to fight a nuclear country, because we need a nuclear world, not a nuclear world.
Let's vote.
All countries in favor, raise your hand.
Vote's anonymous, and that ends this meeting. Thank you.
Andrew, have you explored the International Police Force?
No, it was more of a theoretical idea to be used to make sure that the nuclear weapons are gone.
So that's something that's just hypothetical.
Yes, hypothetical.
And I'm thinking during the presentation, if you would have been able to say, this is what they would do, kind of like 4 or 5 different steps of what they would do in order to protect everybody else in what they're doing right now, I think would have been awesome, because I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
I really think the solution is something it's the bottom line solution, how do you get rid of all the nuclear weapons? But have you guys had a conversation amongst yourself as to how doable that is?
It would be a long shot, I think, but it could be done, but it would really require a lot of mutual trust between countries and a lot of examples set forth, because what countries are trying to do right now is tell each other that they can't have nuclear weapons, but really they need to lead by example.
The fact that nuclear weapons are sort of difficult to get completely rid of would really pose a threat to like how getting rid of every nuclear weapon would be. But really getting rid of, distinguishing beginning to distinguish the country's arsenal, would start to get rid of really some of the conflicts between the countries. Like Pakistan and India, like if you could get rid of that conflict and start to distinguish their stockpiles instead of donating $2.5 billion a year that could be used because of Pakistan is such a poverty-stricken country, that the $2.5 billion is a substantial amount of money that could be used towards something else, is educating their children and people, other than donating it to nuclear weapons just for security that may never be used.
Go ahead, John.
The same thing with US is they spend $5.5 trillion in the past couple of years on developing their arsenal. And I think that money could have been spent elsewhere, money come from other, like helping our own
The debt of
country.
the United States isn't too great to be
Yeah.
donating that amount of money to something else.
And I think there's always going to be a financial incentive for countries to get rid of nuclear weapons, especially countries who are still developing them right now. I mean, it's costing billions of dollars for the countries to donate so much money, but I think the realism point is an excellent point to be brought up, because countries aren't just in the blink of an eye going to give up their nuclear weapons, give up their leverage, give up their foothold in the door just at one meeting. I mean, it's going to take, as Nick brought up, it's going to take a lot of mutual trust from countries, and it's definitely going to take a lot of time. We just kind of, we micro-produced it in a one small meeting to show a simulation, but it's obviously, it would be a long-term process that would require lots of cooperation from countries all over the world. I mean, you take countries like North Korea, who there's really no way of regulating nuclear stockpiles. Countries like North Korea and Pakistan, Israel and Iran. Countries so unstable and deceptive from international security and regulation are very difficult to monitor, and it's going to be difficult at the very least to persuade them to completely eliminate nuclear stockpiles.
Do you think that the United States and Russia would buy on to something like this and to say we are going to get rid of all of our nuclear?
I think that would
What do
be
you
a
guys think?
big
15 minutes left in formal presentation 2. If you finish up early, please get your team group photo at the gymnasium. Thank you.
I think that would be really a big risk. Like, what we were proposing was, you know, since they're number 1 and number 2, I used this analogy in the previous presentation. The big kids on the block, you know, kind of the people that bully everybody else around. I mean, we get rid of ours, and say Pakistan and North Korea don't agree to it. I mean, then they're, even though they're far less than what we used to be, they're in control. You know, and so to just set that example alone, that would be a huge risk.
I think the U.S. and Russia would decrease their stockpiles, but I don't think they'd get completely rid of them. I'm pretty sure the U.S. would not. They'd keep a few secret.
There have already been treaties, especially for Russia, who are currently disassembling 5,000 of their nuclear
There's
weapons.
much less than there was when I was a kid. There were a lot more nuclear weapons.
There were upwards of 70,000 nuclear weapons between Russia and the United States during the Cold War. And I think Andrew brought up a good point. We're decreasing the amount of nuclear weapons we have, but that's more of a realistic measure. I mean, when you look at the chart, the United States and Russia have so many more nuclear weapons. There's really no need to have 10,000, 8,000 nuclear weapons in the world. But I think the United States and Russia are going to be very, very hesitant to give up that kind of power that they have on the rest
As a
of the world.
follow-up question to that, have you guys had a discussion as to whether what's the ethical standing of the United States and Russia to dictate to the rest of the world when they have so many?
That's why.
Well, what we thought was that the United States and Russia would more so set an example, saying if they're willing to start disassembling and disarming and starting to put leave what in the past, what's behind them, then other countries would follow as well.
If you have, let's just say you've got kind of a leader in a neighborhood, like a gangster or something, you know, really grabs the. Sorry, I have a good point here. Like a gangster in the community, an older kid, you know, that gets younger kids to follow him, and then say he decides to change his life. You know, I mean, they'll follow him too. You know, as they did before when they followed him for bad, follow for good.
Big Brother effect.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this is a different situation though, because these people aren't following him to imitate him, they're following him to increase their own standing.
True, but the point Devin brought up was, you know, that the past is gone, and, you know what I mean?
When you and Jace had, you know, back and forth argument, and one of the things that you had brought up is like, well, at 9/11, and I'm going, how did Russia play into 9/11 peace? I said, I was waiting for the U.S. to
Yeah, I
say,
thought he
excuse
was
me,
gonna say something.
you know, so I
You
was just, that
deserve
kind
it.
of threw me off. I thought, how did Russia get, Pakistan's like, you didn't.
Well, it wasn't playing it, like, I wasn't, making an analogy with Russia and Pakistan. I was just bringing up that it happened, and that they were, like, I wasn't bringing myself into it at all.
He was trying to say that terrorism doesn't.
But I would have thought you would say, well, in the United States during that time or something. I thought, well, is that?
Well, I kind of live here, so I was kind of.
Yeah.
And Russia has had issues with terrorism too.
Yeah.
And but there's no way you can really directly correlate Pakistan to 9/11. I mean, there's terrorism in Pakistan, but you can't really identify the country with the incident itself. But I understand what you're saying. The terrorism presence in Pakistan is great, and there's Al-Qaeda operatives. There's the Haqqani network, which Pakistan government works really closely with, and so there's a very good chance that there could be ties between groups that operate in Pakistan and 9/11. And I think that's actually a very good point, that the terrorist presence in Pakistan is the highest in any country in the world. And that fact alone should scare the rest of the countries here, because when you have 110 nuclear warheads and you have the most terrorists in your country than in any other country in the world, there's an extremely high risk factor.
Should have been a little bit more specific with that. Like, I was just going terrorists in general.
Yeah, right, yeah, exactly.
Do you think if you were able to get your resolution passed and that the United States still had nuclear weapons, that the rest of the world would boycott the United States?
Probably. Yeah. If the treaty was developed thoroughly enough.
And everybody else did.
Everyone would have to follow through though.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the question. Do you think everyone would?
I think
That's kind of what everything falls on.
Collective security.
I think so, because betraying such a trust and an act of having nuclear weapons after it was established and there wouldn't be any would kind of almost instantly turn, almost instantly turn all the other countries against the United States, and they'd become more of a, they'd be an enemy really, and I'm sure they would isolate them until they caved in.
But it becomes an economic question then too. So many of the other countries around the world, their economies are a function of the United States also.
Well,
to do it would harm themselves at the same time. And that's kind of my question. I don't think there's really a right answer, but it's just interesting to think about.
Yeah, when you think about the boycotting idea, which was kind of a controversial point that was brought up when we were trying to find a solution that would kind of a penalty system if you broke the nuclear treaty, but the idea is that if a country like the United States violated the treaty, our mindset was that the United States needs the world more than the world needs the United States. And while you're going to see, I mean, like countries like Pakistan receive billions of dollars in aid each year from the United States. You see United States military aid all across the world, but at the same time, the United States relies so heavily on imports from countries like China, all over the world, that it's a risk factor that in the end is going to it's going to hurt the United States more than it's going to hurt the world.
Jacob, how much time did you spend researching Pakistan?
Actually, I do debate, and the last debate topic was about Pakistan, but I've done a lot of research on Pakistan.
It shows. It shows. You did great.
So if you have finished with your formal presentation, please get your group photo taken. 2 until 15 minutes out of the NGO networking fair is on in the cafeteria.
So what happens if the treaty doesn't work? Do you do sanctions? Because we've seen with Iran that sanctions don't really work. They're still bringing about their nuclear
At that point,
program.
we have to.
What's your last resort?
We'd almost have to use military action at that point.
Yeah.
Nuclear weapons.
At that point, we really have to use immediate military action because that is almost the strongest tool the world has against a country that would violate the treaty.
And who would be responsible for that?
Well, it'd have to be global militaries involved in it.
Like the United
As
Nations.
we've seen in the past, like with the United Nations, a lot of the task falls on America usually. But
We would have to fight ourselves.
yeah. But really, it would have to be a global cooperation. It'd have to be like a team operation, really.
Do you think that the United Nations should have more military power?
I think so. If this was put in effect, this proposition that we have simulated here today, the United Nations would definitely be a big player in all this. And I think it would have to be, if there was a treaty, it would just have to be all hands on deck, and we would really have to work together. I mean, nobody could just be a jerk and mess it up.
You would think that since the USSR broke up, that Russia's nuclear weapons would drop considerably. So what was it before when it was USSR?
What was it, like 70?
Well,
I think it was something, I think it was 70 between the two of them. But
Yeah, it was like, I think it might have been like 3 or 4 times what it is now, the nuclear arsenal in Russia.
Because right now it's 10,000.
Yeah, right now it's 10,000.
It's been drastically
Yeah.
increased.
I mean, that's still a ton, you know what I mean?
That's still-
In the Cold War, it was just crazy.
It was like, why?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the point? It's like you.
Yeah. And really, we've had the nuclear threat since the beginning of the Cold War and like the end of World War II, and they've only been used once in the demonstration, and still countries continue to donate all this money to it for things that have only been used twice throughout the entire history of the world, and it just seems pointless to not even like use them. But
yeah, and at a certain point, like continuing to add so many nuclear weapons to your stockpile becomes fruitless because, I mean, if you have 10,500 nuclear weapons, or I mean 10,000 nuclear weapons, it's just it's so incredibly high compared to the rest of the world. It becomes unnecessary. It's just throwing money at it.
That's exactly what an arms race is, though. It's just,
throwing money,
yeah.
But the thing is that like a Cold War could become a hot war in its state,
But then, you know, a Cold War, when that becomes a hot war and it becomes a nuclear war, then man is destroying itself. Because these bombs, they are just the damage that they do, annihilate everything, put radiation in the air for even the survivors. They will get sick. I mean, it's just man can destroy themselves like that with nuclear weapons.
with the nuclear weapon, you hit one place. It's not just short term; it's long term. It takes there's no proven way to like really get rid of radiation. It's gonna be there and make the area uninhabitable for however many years, and that's long term effect.
The long-term effect, it can be upwards of 10 years on the land.
Decades.
Almost.
Depending on how bad it is.
Health effects can span for lifetimes.
And they say that they use these weapons to protect their people, but like everybody
Really?
having these weapons,
Countries
like,
like
it puts so many lives in danger that it's unbelievable.
Pakistan and India are right next to each other, and if they were to use nuclear weapons on one, your own weapons could like radiate your country.
Yeah, exactly.
They're so close at that point.
And like the bombs aren't just affecting like the military and the government, they're affecting innocent people that had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So you're just hurting your own country.
I studied the Cold War quite a bit last year in 8th grade, you know, with my class and everything, and it was near the end of the year, so we were watching a lot of movies, and some of the movies that were made in the 80s were about bombs. I mean, they were real cheesy, as you can imagine, but were about bombs being dropped and, you know, stuff being destroyed. I forget what this was. It was about Kansas, and there were bombs dropped anyway, so that was a horror movie back then. I mean, it's scary. I mean, it really is.
Did you guys ever watch the movie Failsafe? It's was done, what's that, 1960 or so? But it's about a plane that goes past its failsafe point that has nuclear weapons, and it doesn't get called back, and it actually does go to Russia and drop a nuclear bomb. And then how we as the United States, having made this huge mistake, how we deal with it. I highly recommend you try to find it on Netflix, failsafe.
And every time I look at something like that, like a map like that, I think about war games. You know, the movie War
It's
Games.
almost like
And
science
you're
fiction.
thinking,
Yeah.
if all of these nuclear weapons go off, what's left? Like you were saying, forget about years of recovery. There is no recovery because they all blew up. I mean, there's nothing left. So, and I thought about that when I saw that map, like war games. So it just takes one country, you know, Pakistan or Russia or the U.S. to get upset and set them off, and that's it. You don't have to have 10,000. You know, it's like,
It'd also be interesting to see the average cost of a nuclear weapon and what they could put that money towards, like you guys were talking about, like one nuclear weapon can equal 12
North Korea can't even light their own cities at night because all their money's for nuclear weapons.
Yeah, we're trying to fly rockets, right?
Yeah, I wanna kind of conclude my portion of this with at the beginning, when I think it was the beginning of the semester when we first started studying the Cold War and all this. Jacob's dad came in and he explained to us a girl breaks up with a guy, right? And so the guy gets mad. So the guy decides to bring. What was it like a hammer? A hammer, right? Yeah. So the guy decides to bring a hammer. So no, I'm not gonna follow. So, the girl brings a knife. The guy brings a gun. The girl brings a bazooka. The guy brings a tank. It's just like keeps going back and forth, escalating. You know?
It's like anything you can do at
Yeah. It's just totally unnecessary.
Well, I think the sad part about it is that we as human beings around the world culturally don't get to appreciate each other as cultures. Because I can tell you, as having served as a Peace Corps volunteer, the country I served in was very different. Everyone's human, but how they view the world is different. Just as a note, just as an idea, they viewed Americans as all having guns and fighting all the time. That's how they view us. I had to change that concept to make them think, no, that's not true. You've just been watching Chuck Norris movies, which is what they did. They would watch Chuck Norris movies because you didn't have to understand the language, you could just visually watch it. But you watch something like that enough, and then you start to make assumptions about who those people are. And I think we do that around the world so much because I don't think we're really all that different. But, the fact of the matter is Iran and Israel are going at it, and India and Pakistan are going at it. They're not that different.
and you would think that China, with the growth that China has, that they would be the ones heading, the nuclear weapons that are
Well, the truth really is that my country is actually very critical. I looked more into it, and they're trying to tell the United States and Russia to cut down on their stockpiles. But what country's intelligence is finding out is that China is actually building an underground network and storing nuclear weapons in it. So it's almost like it comes down to trust, really.
And Russia and China are not even willing to get in the relay in Syria.
Yeah.
They're fueling that conflict pretty well. And if they're willing to do that, how far are they willing to go with nuclear weapons as well,
Good point.
Is that it? Yeah. Guys, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's stop it. Yeah, so just press that.